so that people will remember what we did. Thank you.
Oh, you're gonna dance.
I can do it. I'm Dennis Ash, and I was in 3rd platoon.
Hey, Dennis, you gotta move on here.
Sorry.
This is your square, right?
Okay.
Gotta get in front of the dancing girl.
And
Yeah.
dancing
I was in 3rd platoon. Started out, I got drafted in February of 1969. And went to Fort Benning, did my basic training there. And then I went to Fort McClellan, Alabama, did the AIT there. And of course, in July of '69, I got sent to Vietnam. I was on a sniper team. I was a sniper on the sniper team, and little Dave over here was my backup guy, Sergeant Marty Vaughn. He's not here, but he was the our other backup guy, and he just kind of spotted for me and stuff like that. But I wish he could have been here along with another guy, that William Mitchell. He took turns walking point with me. When Denny Bush over here left and went home, we took over walking point. And anyway, we were headed for LZ Dottie, when most of you remember that went through that transition when we got moved from the Rocket Pocket and all that out there to down to My Lai area. And we were in the staging area there at LZ Bayonet, and I was going over the map, getting ready to, choppers were going to pick us up. Going over the map with Lieutenant Hurt, I think was Ambassador Hurt, was it Hurt? Is that right? And we were standing, there was a big fire behind us, and there was an explosion in the fire, and I got wounded in the right calf and left arm here. And so the helicopters didn't take me down there. The medevac took me to 91st VAC Hospital. And after I recovered, they sent me back to LZ Bayonet, spent some time there, recovering from the wounds and stuff. And then I was on the pad, ready to go back down and meet up with the guys. And Lieutenant Cooper had become, he was our platoon leader, and he had become the XO of Delta Company. And he saw me sitting on the pad. He says, "What are you doing out here?" And I said, "Well, I'm waiting for the chopper to come pick me up, take me down to My Lai to meet up with the guys." And he says, "Man," he says, "you only have a short period of time left, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." All of us knew exactly the number of days we had left. So I spit it right out to him, and he says, "Come on with me." And he took me back to headquarters, and he said, "Find this guy a job." And so they put me in charge of all the drivers in the motor pool. I was a sergeant at that time. And so for the rest of the time I was in Vietnam, I was the head of the drivers of the motor pool. And I'm the guy that made sure that stuff got sent out to the field of you guys at that point. And then at about that same time, let's see, it was right, I forget the exact date, but any of you that were there remember that they moved the unit over to Chu Lai, and they turned LZ Bayonet over to the Arvins. And so I spent just a couple of weeks, I don't know, 2-3 weeks maybe, at Chu Lai at the new headquarters over there, and then headed on home. And since that time, I've been with Snap-on Tools. I was with them almost 10 years. I left Snap-on, got into the computer business, taught myself how to program, and I've been, since 1983, I've been in the computer software business, and so right now we design websites for clients all over the world, basically, is what we do. That's it.
Good job.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Doug Burnett. Before I get into, my story, I want to say a special thanks to Lynn and all you folks that were involved in putting this together. This is my first one, and it's cool. I got to talk to some people, but thank you, Lynn, for putting that together. I want to introduce my girlfriend, Sharon, my spouse.
I thought it was your daughter.
Somebody put rank on that guy. Well said.
I'm in sales.
Or politics. I was drafted in February of '69. Went to Fort Wood. I live just up the road here near Columbia, Missouri, so it's about a 3-hour drive down here. But anyway, went to Fort Wood, did my basic there, and from there I was sent down to Fort Sill and trained on 105s and 155s. Went to Vietnam, assuming I'd be on top of a hill, Bayonet or Fat City or someplace like that, Dottie, shooting 05s or 55s. Well, as you know, the infantry has FO teams, so they plucked a number of us. I went out to the field originally with Charlie, 1st of the 6th, and I got to carry the radio for the first few months. Then in November, I was transferred to Delta Company as the FO, and I spent 2 months, November and December, with Delta. Very few folks, I was with the CP. The folks that I remember were, Gary Salpini. He was here, and I got to talk to him last night. Harlan Preve, got reacquainted with Harlan. Fats Moorhead, who I think passed away 5 or 6 years ago. But my experience was brief with you fellas, but there was an incident in December where Captain Colley and some of the other folks ran into some trouble. And I never had a clear understanding what actually happened that particular night, but in visiting with Salpini and Harlan and some of the other folks, it cleared up all the questions I had about that particular incident. So trip down here was worth it for me just to get those questions answered. Again, I want to thank Lynn for putting this together, and thank you, Lynn.
Lynn.
A lot of filming girls,
No, it's on his mind.
Okay, I'm gonna sing first, okay, you don't mind?
Go ahead.
No, okay, I'm Denny Bush. I'm proud to be part of the 1st of 6th, 198th Delta Company. I was there in '69, '70, and again, thanks for all this, what you've done for us. For me, to be here is very emotional. You see so many guys, and it's very touching. And I think the guys are not here. So I like to do a tribute, a minute, because guys are not, if you don't mind, a silent minute, guys who couldn't be here. All right, thank you very much, I appreciate that. And one guy I want to say thank you to is Little Dave. Because I tell you what, when those stand downs came down, Little Dave got us through a lot of stuff. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. And I said, short and sweet, I love you guys. And God bless each and one of you guys.
What you're missing here on these girl shows is Little Dave and who was it, Lewis next to you?
Lewis,
Yeah. Both of them are totally drunk, right? With their bottle in their hand. But anyway, we'll let Dave talk.
I'll be a long time.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm known as Little Dave. My real name is David Lawrence. I think this undertaking that Lynn and John and anybody, and I know Pearl, this is a great honor and a great tribute to each and every one of us. My story is I was given a draft deferment, and the only way I could get out of my draft deferment was to enlist. So I enlisted on March 24th, 1969. And what I found out after I got done with my military service, I was working in a tank car repair shop. And the reason I was given a draft deferment was because the cars I was working on were DODX cars, Department of Defense. And they carried Agent Orange. And right outside of our doors, 50 feet away, they were being steam cleaned. And everybody in the shop I was in has died from some form of cancer. And a lot of people say, man, you got to be crazy to go down and enlist. No, I think that was a smart move. Because we got to deal with Agent Orange after it was cut. Those guys down there were dealing with it uncut. But yeah, I enlisted, and I took my basic at Fort Gordon, Georgia, and I took my AIT at Fort Gordon, Georgia. The only thing is I got a 2-week leave in between and no travel money. So my parents had to come down and get me and bring me home. In fact, 42 years ago, yesterday, was my first day in South Vietnam. And I was attached to USO, and then they transferred me to Delta Company, 1st or 6th, 3rd Platoon. And that's a lie. I was never in the USO. But somehow, every time we got together, the guys in my brothers in my platoon would buy me an old guitar. And unfortunately, I didn't bring my last guitar I have at home. My son gave it to me as a Christmas gift, and he took it to a very good friend of mine who builds guitars. And he fixed the face of it and built a new bridge for it and everything, but the back of it still looks like it went through a war. And I know Hal Zimmerman, when I first met up with Hal, he thanked me for carrying an M60 machine gun on one shoulder and the guitar on the other shoulder. And I just hope he can remember that speech, because when I pass, I would really love them to repeat that, because it sounded like I was really a great guy, you know. But yeah, all my brothers, a lot of my brothers here, Denny Ash from the Sniper Squad. If it wasn't for Denny here just a couple months ago, he sent me some pictures. I never told anybody I was in the Sniper Squad because, yeah, what a BSer, you know. But thank you, Denny. You know, in my life, I worked in the steel mill for about 15 and a half years. I was self-employed for 6 years. I became a journeyman carpenter, vice president of local Carpenter 268. There's about 475 members. I got retired about 6 years ago, and I have a son. His name is DJ. He lives in Tampa, Wesley Chapel, northeast of Tampa. I have 2 wonderful grandchildren, Reese and Selah, and that's my life. Oh, and I also went back to playing music. I recorded like 12 or 13 albums in the polka field. One album I played on was a double album because this polka club I belonged to. I played 3 songs on this double album. It was nominated for a Grammy back in 1989. So that's one of my great accomplishments. And I guess that's my life.
My name is Paul Uncle. First, it's great to be alive. Like you, I went to Vietnam. I know most of you wanted to go, but I have to tell you, I did not want to go. I was drafted, and I ended up in Fort Jackson. And there I went to heaven on earth, Fort Polk, Louisiana. It was 10 times better than Vietnam. Lie. Again, I didn't want to go, so I decided to go to Shake and Bake School. And I was in Fort Benning, Georgia for about 3 months. And after that, I ended up back in Fort Jackson again, training troops, which was kind of fun. The fun was about to end. In September 1969, I ended up in Vietnam. During that time, I broke in 5 lieutenants, Most of them listened to me. One did. Few didn't. And I think I had to deal with 3 different captains. I wasn't very military, and I am so proud of that. Top told me that. He said I was the most unmilitary person he had ever met. And I was leaving, so I could say anything. And I said, you know, that's the biggest compliment anyone has ever paid me. I didn't ask to come to your stupid war. And I'm going home. I'll tell you a couple of brief stories. A lot of you remember Cooper, Jim Cooper. One of the nicest guys I ever met. He always reminded me of Dom DeLuise. And I was young, as all you were, and you could talk me into about anything. So he talks me into stealing a Jeep. We drive down in front of the MP building, steal a refrigerator. This is true. We stole the refrigerator because we were going to sell it. Well, we were really brilliant. We had stolen a gas refrigerator, which is absolutely useless there. So he gets the bright idea. We take it down to the Navy Yard, and we trade it for, I think it was about a dozen lobster tails. And I asked the Navy guy, I said, you know, I never saw lobster tails. I said, who eats these lobster tails? He said, oh, the generals do. So you can see they really had a hard time. We took the lobster tails and we brought them back to the barracks. We were on stand down at the time. We woke up the cook and we boiled those lobster tails. Some of you were probably invited. I don't know who was and who wasn't. If you weren't, and they were good. As far as coming home, I remember I was at the airport in, I guess it's Washington State. I don't know where we flew out of. Maybe it's Oregon. At any rate, of course, you had to have your uniform on, you know, and a tie. And I remember I'm doing the tie, and it was open just a little bit. And some cop said to me, you have to button that back up, or you will not be able to fly on the airplane. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I mean, after all I and all of you've been through, I thought, what a petty thing. When I got home, I had not one person call me a baby killer. Actually, most people, I'm from Baltimore, so most people there are rather, you know, respectful. So I never had that problem. They were good people. Am I glad I went? Hell no. Am I glad I met most of you? Hell yes. I met some really great people there. And you all haven't changed. Well, maybe a little bit. You've changed. Personality-wise, I mean, I see the same people now that I saw then. I worked for Sears for 34 years. Left there. Well, actually, I married my wife, Gail. I met her. She helped me keep my sanity, by the way. I worked for Sears for 34 years. We decided to move to Las Vegas, Nevada. We lived there for 5 years. We moved back to Baltimore. From Baltimore, we ended up in Florida. That's where I am now. I live in Tampa. And that's the story of my life. It's nice to see you all again. Thank you.
Hello, I'm John Pugh. I've talked to most of you at some point in time, probably in the last 6 months. Here I am. This started after I got a hold of, or talked with Lynn, and we kind of divided our duties up. He was going to handle this and as much in my area as he could, and I was the contact man. I've done my best to contact each and every one of you. Most of my contacts is either word of mouth. Somebody would say, hey, did check on this guy. All I needed was a middle initial and what state he was from, and I could run down a lot of information. I think I ended up, it was right at 80-some people I got a hold of finally. And the last one that I got a hold of was Pat Reddy. He was an RTO that said he would love to be here, but it was just too short a notice. But he is experiencing right now prostate cancer. He's been through this. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted these guys, you guys, to get together and band together in case something came up that we could help each and one of us. Mako, Jim, do you remember Mako? Dave, is it Marco? Mako? Marco. He's from Pennsylvania somewhere. He's another one that's struggling with cancer right now. So the area that we were in was very, very high in Agent Orange usage. Salpini, Gary, I don't see him here now, but he was telling me there was one hill in the Rocket Pocket that if it was in the United States right now, it would be in part of the Superfund to clean up. It was that heavily used in our area. We didn't know it, but it was. But to contact each and every one of you and hear a different story of the things that they experienced is just so rewarding. You might have little Dave say that, I remember this, what happened. Larry Newswanger, well, I remember it just a little bit different way. Jim Glasscock, same way. I remember something happening just a little different. That's why it's important, like Lynn was saying, that we get our stories together and actually find out what the history of this group is and contact individuals that was such a big part of our lives. It's just so important. I was drafted in July of 1969. Took my training at Fort Lewis, Washington, and went across the parade field to take my AIT. I was hoping the whole time that I wouldn't be sent to Vietnam. I should have been playing the lottery, but I got picked to go to Vietnam in December 1969. Before I went, I was telling guys this morning, I had a little bit of leave time left, and the leave time actually ended just before Christmas in 1969. And I didn't want to go. So I didn't go. I took an extra week's leave, and everybody asked me, said, well, you know, aren't you afraid? I said, what are they going to do, send me to Vietnam? You know, it couldn't got any worse. Anyway, they tacked that on at the end, and it didn't pay any. Anyway, to make a long story short, I got to Delta Company late December of 1969, went through several experiences with a lot of the guys. There was an ambush in January that we lost 5 men. There was, when we were in a move transition to the Rocket Pocket, or from the Rocket Pocket to the My Lai area, early on there was, my best friend was killed, Carl Roninger. He was a medic. Most of the guys from 3rd Platoon can remember him. We lost L.T. Hurt then. There was Alabama that was messed up pretty bad, Monroe, Desashire, and the list just goes on. We miss those guys. This is very important that we continue so that we can remember them always. Then there was the August the 14th. And I think out of that experience there was like 17 men hit. And there was like 7 or 8 men was all that was left that actually walked away. We need to remember these things. Anyway, I started out as a radio operator. As soon as I got off the chopper, I was very fortunate enough that a little guy with red hair met me at the helicopter and said, here, take this.
Who was it?
Little Dave. So I carried radio the whole time. April of 1970, I was moved up to the CP. I think I took Salapini's place. And then from there, I think it was early August, I moved to Talk at LZ Dottie. And I was stationed there up until I got my early out in November 1970. And that's basically it for me. Here's Larry.
You always hand stuff off to me, don't you? Oh, I was one of those people that decided to go to college before I went into the military, hoped to avoid Vietnam. But when you major in forestry science, nobody wants to hire you because you're in good shape. and walk around and everything. So my parents got tired of me hanging around home and said, well, maybe you ought to go enlist and get that out of the way. So 2 months to the day, right after I graduated from college, I enlisted into the Army, went to Fort Dix for basic, and they flew me out to Fort Lewis for AIT, and then I guess when John was on his holiday, they sent me home for Christmas. Of course, you had to pay your own way back and forth because they were flying me out of St. Louis to go to Vietnam. So in January, I ended up in Vietnam, Delta Company. Met John and a bunch of other friends, little Dave, and all the other people here in Delta Company, 3rd Platoon. And John deserted me. He went off to CP. And so there was rumors that there was a sniper school, so I was going to follow Dennis's shoes and go to sniper school, but there wasn't any openings. But they said, hey, we have an opening in recon school. You want to go to that? I said, okay, they'll get me out of the field for a week. So I went to recon school for 1 week, and then when I graduated, I was dumb enough to come out first in the class. And the S3 major said, congratulations, with this first of the class thing you get a promotion. I said, oh great, that sounds good to me. I go from a PFC to a Spec 4. And by the way, you're not going back to Delta Company, you're going to Echo Recon. Here the Lieutenant Linsenberger, who was in Delta Company Battalion 3, transferred from Delta Company to Echo Recon and said, I want Larry to go with me. So, you know, how do you argue with that? It's pretty difficult. So I ended up with Echo Recon from about July to when my tour ended in December of '70. So I missed some of the incidences that John was talking about as far as in August I was over in Echo Company. And I definitely remember Lieutenant Hurt and that incident. So. From there I decided I was going to try to extend, but then last minute I decided not to, pulled my letter off the helicopter and came home. And then they sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia, and there's so many people because they started demob in Vietnam coming through. And I played another dead move, and I volunteered to help them sort through all those records and everything. Ended up seeing a lot of people from Delta Company coming through there. I was lucky enough to get assigned to the replacement battalion there in Fort Benning. And seeing I was a sergeant, they put me in charge of sign-in on the night shifts. Pretty difficult to get a job. Bureau of Forestry in Pennsylvania decided to hire some people, so I ended up being employed there, and I spent 35 years with the Bureau of Forestry as a forester for the Bureau. I did a lot of different jobs there. And in '07, they started messing things around. A couple of years ago, they were giving incentives to retire, and now they start penalizing you for working. So I decided, well, before they penalize me too much, I'm going to jump out. I'm now a consultant forester, working for myself. And on the side, I always used to like to play with income tax, so I do income tax preparation also. So, if you have any questions about forestry, I'm not that good in taxes yet, but I can answer some of
I'm Jack Rose, and I'm different than probably most of you. I was happy to get drafted. I worked for this guy that in the morning we had to turn the lights on our equipment to get to the field. We had to have our lights on to get back from the field. And I thought military seemed a whole lot easier than what I was in. Had I known, I probably would have been a lot happier working there. And I would like to thank everybody who put this on, because my wife and I have been wanting to do something like this, but didn't know where to start, so I'm really thrilled for Lynn and John, and 'cause John was the one that called me, and I was still sleeping that morning, and I wasn't quite sure when he said it was John Pugh. I said, who? After I talked a minute or two, well,